Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that explores how behavioral science connects with the way we work and live. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. Each week, we talk with authors, researchers, and practitioners who help us uncover the science and the art of better living and better leadership.
Our guest today is Don Kieffer, co-author of There's Got to Be a Better Way. Now, Don is a self-described factory rat who worked his way up from the shop floor to leading major projects at Harley-Davidson. And along the way, he partnered with MIT social scientist Nelson Repenning to create a model they called the dynamic work design.
Yeah, dynamic work design challenges long-held assumptions about efficiency and adaptability. And with this model, the authors argue that common sense lessons leaders learn are often exactly the wrong ones because the real signals of good work show up months or years later, not the next day. He also believes that the best solutions come from those closest to the work, but only if leaders and technical experts create genuine partnerships with those people.
Yeah. In our conversation, Don talked about why meetings are often the worst form of organizational abuse.
Woo!
Love that, right?
Yeah.
And why managers frequently become the very obstacle that they're trying to remove. And why making work visible, literally drawing it out on the wall, can change everything.
I tell you, I'm using Don's draw out complex issues all the time now. Like, I absolutely love it.
You have your whiteboard behind you.
I do. I use it all the time.
You've shown it to me. Look, I drew it. There you go. So with that, people, please grab a strong cup of Java, Don's favorite fuel, and enjoy our conversation with Don Kieffer.
Don Kieffer, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's really a pleasure to have you here. And we want to start by loosening up with a little speed round, 4 short, simple, silly questions. And to start with, would you prefer to learn a new language or a new instrument?
New language, which I have attempted many, many times and always fail at. For a long time, I traveled for business and consulting. I was in every continent in the globe. And I always tried to learn a few words in every language I went to, because I think it's the key to culture. And it's just in my business, just trying to get along with people, even making an attempt to speak in their language was good. So I always knew how to say, can I have a beer, please? Where's the bathroom? Where's the bus stop? The name of the hotel. But it served me well. Like when I was in China, people would say, oh, you speak pretty well. Can we switch to English now? Because they wanted to practice their English. So, but it always served me well.
Yes,
but
please.
But I could never get really the hang of formal language. Yeah. I wish I could.
We get it.
Dos cerveza, por favor. That's meant my too. The asking for a beer in multiple languages is about as good as I've gotten. So, all right. We will go to the next speed round question. And it's our classic one. So are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker?
Oh, there's no doubt. I'm good coffee.
Good coffee.
I walk
around
with
cold. Was that cold coffee?
No, it's hot. Just in a clear glass instead of an opaque cup. But yeah.
Are you very particular about the type and style of coffee that you get?
Well, I've learned to appreciate good coffee now. So I even have an espresso machine. But when I started working, it was 25-cent cup of coffee out of the machine. And that was like prison money. It was like cigarettes in prison. You go buy someone a coffee out of a machine, they'll do anything for you. So it was like, I drank that stuff all day long.
And that was the coffee out of the machine where it dropped, the paper cup dropped down.
Oh, yeah.
And it was
horrible.
And it was
it was hot. Yeah. It was, whatever. So, but I walked around with a 16-ounce cup of coffee in my hand for 20, 30 years of my career. Yeah.
Wow. And you're still alive. I think.
But I've had to decaffeinate though. But
all right. Well, blah 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 blah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Third speed round question: true or false? True or false? Common sense is a good guide for business improvement.
No freaking way. That's the whole part of it. That's the entire book. You just said the entire book.
Well, we're gonna actually get to more of that in some detail here then as we go.
Yeah. So, last of our speed round questions, and again, I think this will be a longer conversation as we get into the details of the book. But from your perspective, which structure is better? Organizations that are structured for efficiency or organizations that are structured for adaptability?
Well, generally, I'd say it has to be adaptability because things you can get so efficient that you get stuck. But that's actually it's a false belief. It's like, do you want low cost or high quality? Because you can't have both.
Hmm.
And actually, you can have. So
Yeah.
I think again, this is the theme of the book. You can have adaptability and high efficiency. It's a matter of how you do the high efficiency, that you don't lock people into just doing one thing. So again, that's kind of the breaking kind of these long held assumptions about work that we've tried to do in the book, that you can actually, and that's my colleague, the MIT social scientist, this is one of his big things, is he has a formal way of saying it, but basically you can break this model between you're either efficient or adaptable. You can actually be both. It's a big thing in the business psychology things.
Okay, well, why is efficiency a bad thing? Just what's wrong with that? Because we have leaders who are working hard at making organizations more efficient all the time.
It's more how you do it, Tim. So, for example, if you just automate heavily around one thing, okay, like let's go to, I do a lot of mostly intellectual work now, but let's go to factory physical products. If I build a factory just to make one thing and only one thing, and it's hardwired, okay, if the market changes, I'm screwed. Okay, but if I can get that efficiency in a way that I can easily adapt, that it's not so complicated to adapt, maybe I trade off a tiny bit of efficiency, but in intellectual work, we don't find that that's happening. But the world is always moving. So this is why it's called dynamic work design. We have to be on that leading edge, but you can get high efficiency doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're talking with Don about his new book, There's Got to Be a Better Way. And we were thinking, when we read the title,
Am I allowed to do that?
You are
Yes, you
absolutely.
are. It's the brand new book that you just got.
Brand new
Yay.
book. We tend to think of there's got to be a better way as sort of like a frustrating comment, like when everything else is just going to hell.
Exactly.
You and your co-author, basically, are you more or less fed up with the way leadership is treating organizations these days?
I'm way past that. I mean, that's
okay.
People say, "Well, why do leaders act that way?" I have no clue, but I can help fix it. I worked with a guy from Japan for a long time. He's the one that taught me about visual management, and he'd go like, "Don, why are American managers so crazy? I have no clue. Let's just go fix it."
Well, what are leaders getting wrong?
The main thing that they get wrong is they just focus on people. So I'm going to give you a target. And the target could be made up, usually they're not very connected to the work. So I'm going to give you a target that may be good target or bad target. But if you don't make the target, then I'm going to punish you. If you do, I'm going to give you a raise. They don't really get to like, how did you get there? Did you cut corners? Did you kill people or cheat people? Or did you really improve things? I have no way of knowing, but you met the target. So let's go. It's their being divorced from how the work is really done that I think is where they mostly go wrong. Most managers are trying to do the right thing. They're faced with difficult problems, a lot of huge load, cognitive load. Can I throw in a behavioral word? A huge cognitive load. And they're trying to, pick out the best thing to do. But when they're divorced from the work, then there are assumptions about what's happening and there are common sense about what's happening, which is usually wrong, forces them to give solutions that just layer on top of other parts. And so what we say is, go see what's really happening in the work, get connected to the work. Then you use those skills and now you can move forward. So Don, it's just really frustration with people just not connected with the work and the people doing the work and what they have to go through to try and win the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting the way that you say that, Don, because both Tim and I do a lot of work with organizations as well. And one of the things that I see all the time is that target, that goal. The senior leadership sets a goal. that's based on not necessarily even reality, right? And oftentimes it's revenue targets or whatever that would be, and you're working with salespeople, and then you get down and they're going, salespeople are like, this is an unrealistic goal, and why are you even there? And that just sets up a whole dynamic that I think creates this aspect where we look and there's got to be a better way is what comes to our heads when we think about that. I'm sure we're going to get into this more as we get further into the conversation, but you base a lot of the book on this version of dynamic work design. Can you kind of overlay what dynamic work design is and I'm sure we'll get more in depth in that. Is that
Yeah. Kurt, first, can I go back to the previous comment about the leaders? Because I think there's a counter argument to, oh, that's an impossible task. A lot of times, like, look at Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
He gave what people thought was a crazy goal, like one button on the phone. But the difference with Steve, I believe, I didn't know him, was that he knew enough about the market and he knew enough about the technology that he could get there. But what he saw is people weren't focused on. They were just focused and stuck in their own kind of thought process and their own assumptions about what was possible. But he could see a way. He just wasn't the engineer to do it. So I think sometimes leaders can give those breakthrough goals, but usually they know what they're talking about because it's a deep knowledge, like inventors. Thomas Edison did the light bulb. He just didn't say, go do the light bulb. He did 10,000 experiments on the bench, sleeping on the bench with his engineers, and working 20 hours a day to find it. He knew it was possible. He just didn't know where. So I think sometimes those goals are appropriate, but it's the people that just make stuff up. And then when people don't do it, they blame it on the people. Oh, you're not a leader enough. So I think there is this balance between what is a good target. It's the right amount of stretch that can get there, that we can actually do it. And sometimes it's too much stretch. And when it is, we recognize it and thank you anyway for getting as far as you get. So I think there's a big middle ground in there so that people can move fast.
Thank you. And thank you for that clarification, because I think what you just mentioned, it is something that we see, is this idea where the way that a manager approaches those targets, those goals, is just as important as what those goals are, right? And as you said, it's Steve Jobs understood enough to know that this, while it might feel impossible or difficult or super hard, that there is a way to get there. And even if you don't get exactly to what he wants, you're going to get to a far better place than you would by just saying, all right, we're going to just do the incremental gain that we typically think about. So I think I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don, I want to come back to something we were talking about before we went live here, and that is just the relationship. You partnered, and you have partnered for many years with an MIT social scientist. Why? I guess you're a smart guy. You've been walking factory floors for a long time, right? You've accumulated a lot of knowledge. Why would you partner up with a social psychologist, a social scientist, to help solve some of these problems?
Well, I'll tell you the story how we met, and I think that will probably answer it.
Great.
So I was started on the shop floor with a high school degree, ended up going to engineering school later, and ended up at Harley-Davidson to talk my way into leading the biggest engine project that they had in 15 years. And I was from the factory, so it wasn't a design engineer. It was like the first time this ever happened. Like they let a guy from the factory lead the engine project. And I was a problem solver, so I was good at fixing stuff. I could run the machine, I could run the department, I could run the organization. And I thought I had a better idea for introducing new products into production, which I had been on the receiving end of for a long time. And so, and this was the biggest. Harley almost went out of business in 1985. They had a huge layoff, like 40% of the people almost went bankrupt. And they were, 5 years later, they're on their way back. But this project was so big, it started breaking every system it touched. So I was in my glory, like fixing this, fixing that. And one of the things I did was, when they gave me the assignment, was I studied how they had done the last few projects and tried to make like a process map. So I ended up inventing a stage gate process in product development, which of course the automotive industry had done 20 years before. But I figured it out myself. So I'm so proud of myself for doing all this stuff. And Nelson Repenning is his name. We've been working. This is 1996 when we first met. He had been hired by Harley, by the late Ron Hutchinson, to come and help Harley think about where's the next battleground for quality, because they'd fixed a lot of stuff in the factory, but like, where's the next battleground? And he basically said, well, it's in how you design the product. You have to design the product better. And they said, oh, you got to go talk to Don Kieffer. So we had lunch together, Nelson and I.
Okay.
And I'm like 15 years older than him. He had just got his PhD or just got his tenure or something. And I'm like in my mid to late 40s. And I'm like, I'm like working 20 hours a day on this. I'm so excited, like a kid in a candy store. And he's like this wise old soul sitting back. So I explained to him, I showed him the piece of paper where I like graphed it out, moved it around and created this stage gate process. And Nelson just like listened to me go on and on for like 15 minutes. He goes, Don, why don't you read a book once in a while? This is done by the automotive company 20 years ago. He wasn't impressed.
He called you out right away.
Oh, yeah. He was not impressed. This young, he's like a kid to me. He was like 28. And I'm like, my 40s, like, what? So we started taking a walk and I started telling him some of the other stuff I'm doing. And I told him this one thing that I had done. And he goes, oh, wait a minute. I want to know more about this. And I go, well, Nelson, this is just some little dumb thing I did. He goes, yeah, but Don, that little dumb thing you did, there's not a lot written about it in the literature, but what's written says you should have done exactly the opposite of what you did. And your results are stunning. So I want to learn more about it. That was the moment the light went on and said, look, I know I'm a bit of a loose cannon. This guy can help me aim. From his mind, he goes like, this guy's doing stuff. He's a crazy guy, but he's got the mind of an academic. He's always trying to learn something and figure it out. And so we started working together. That's how it started.
I love where you said, if he can help me aim, because I think that's what behavioral science can do, right? I mean, for anybody that's in business, behavioral science isn't necessarily rocket science. It's a lot of times it's the things that we're already doing. We're putting names to it, as we talked about prior to getting on this. It's like just making it, but it is helping somebody who's in your position or in any of like leadership positions say, all right, how do I aim this better? How do I make sure that what we're doing actually tackles the right pieces of this as we're moving forward? And oh man, we could just keep going on and on, but I want to get into some of the, I was really fascinated by like when you started that whole story, you said, I talked my way into this job of leading this. And I wanted to hear more about, how do you talk your way from the manufacturing floor into the job of redesigning an engine? Because that's not typically how you think about leadership. You don't talk your way into something from that.
That's another good story. But I want to respond to the other thing you said first, which is that relationship between doing something and thinking about it, why it worked, is actually what we've been doing for almost 30 years. Like we would make change, either I would do it directly or in a client of mine, or some of our students would do it and we're supervising them and we'd say, why'd that work? How can we put a sharper point on it? It's that back and forth that led to the content in the book. We just didn't go study a successful company. We studied success and failure that we had seen. So,
okay, there's some important things we want to get to in the book. You organize the book in three primary areas, right? Obstacles, principles, and actions. And kind of curious about obstacles. And I mean, it's a great way to start. It seems intuitive, right, that we're going to start with obstacles. But what do leaders get wrong when it comes to identifying and understanding obstacles?
Well, I'm not sure if it's really obstacles. It's more, why do they learn exactly the wrong lesson? When they do stuff, they take an action, they learn exactly the wrong lesson. I'll give you an example. And the reason we started there is because that was Nelson's, how he got his doctoral thesis. That was his doctoral thesis. On this aspect. I'll make it much more simple. He wrote, papers and books. He didn't write a book, but he wrote, he'd go for hours. I'll make it simple.
Good. We don't have hours.
when you touch a hot stove, you feel it and you get burned right away. So you learn very quickly not to touch hot stoves anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, but imagine if you touched a hot stove and you didn't feel the burn on your finger for 3 months. Okay? How would you figure out what that was from? You'd probably attribute it to like, oh, I was riding my bike and I burned my finger. So the way we learn is when the action and the result are in close proximity in time. When they're spread over time, we have a hard time putting those two things together. So when leaders take short-term actions that give short-term results at the expense of long-term performance, they don't really see the long-term performance. So, Tim, I want you to cut the maintenance cost for next year by 30%. Okay, Don, I'll go do it. You come in the next day and say, Don, I cut it by 50%. It's like, wow, how'd you do that? Well, I laid off 50% of the maintenance force. Now, if I hadn't asked you that question, I'd maybe promote you. Okay, but now if I understand, because I understand a long-term impact of that, we're not going to feel it right away. We're going to feel it in 6 months or 6 years, probably after I'm gone to another job. And the poor slob who takes my job is going to be suffering through a maintenance force that's half the size with twice the trouble. So I think that's how managers take these actions. They learn exactly the wrong lessons from them many times.
Yeah. This also reminds me of a key lesson you point out in the book about how important it is that the best solutions can come from those who are closest to the work, because they've had their fingers on the hot stove. They've had that experience very directly with great impact. I love the way that you emphasize that.
But there's another piece to it, because it's a partnership between those who are doing the work and those that are managing the work. Because even though I know where the problems are and maybe where some solutions are, I don't know what's best for the business, and I don't know all the solutions. Mm-hmm. So I used to run a lathe, a metal cutting lathe, and it would get this harmonic. It would start singing, and I would put a wet paper towel in the end of the tool. It was like and it would fix it. But in engineering came down and said, Don, do you know about harmonics? Like, no, I have no clue about harmonics. It's because the support for the tool was hanging out too far. You need to bring the support closer to change the harmonics. He had science for it. So I think it's this partnership between leaders and technical people and people doing the work that really makes the best. Because if you just say, oh, people know naturally what to do, you get to empowerment, which means to me abandonment. Oh, let's just let people run the factory the way they feel is best. Try that one day. See how it works for you.
Not a good idea.
No.
Well, and there's some aspect of that too, where because you only have a small perception of the overall business, right? So if I'm working a lathe, that's, I get I can know that really well, but I don't necessarily know the other pieces that either lead into that or follow through with that, which brings that whole picture into play. And I think you talk about that vision part of as you're talking in the book. So I think that's really important as well. I did have a question as it related to obstacles, and I'm not sure if you have an answer for this or not, but what happens when the obstacle is ourselves? That, in other words, it's me as the leader that is the actual obstacle. And how do we overcome that? I mean, is that something that you have a thought on, or do we just want to dismiss that question and move on?
No. I think a lot of times, and more often than not, it is the leader who's the problem. I remember distinctly going to solve a problem and getting off my desk and going to another part of the office and talking to people and trying to track it down. And the poor person where the problem's happening looks up at me and says, well, Don, this is how you told me to do it in the email you sent me 3 months ago. So I think that's just a tiny example, but I think leaders don't understand always the impact on the organization of things they put in place, back to the thing we said in the beginning, because they don't really understand the work that well. So they make a solution that they think is happening, but it's not really fit for purpose. So I think the trick is, how do leaders know that they're the problem? Where do they get that insight? And I think that's in our method, which is you have to go see where the problem's happening with a mindset of discovery from the design of work, not just from people's personality or their behaviors, but from the design. How's the work driving those behaviors? How's the work producing that problem all over time? And what part did I play in it? I mean, you rarely hear someone walk in a meeting say, oh yeah, this problem is here because I cut the budget 2 years ago. You just don't hear that. So I think this is hard for leaders, but I think part of the method is between visual management that we have, where we put the work on the wall so everyone can see it, and going to see the problem where it's happening with a discovery mindset, opens people's minds to, okay, I did that. It's not my fault. I was behaving rationally, but I can see where that was wrong. Now let's just fix it. It's not you're bad. but it's like, no, I learned something, so I'll change my behavior to make this work better. And I think that's around it. But the key is getting leaders to recognize that they're part of the problem, which a lot are not willing to do.
Hey Groovers, we're interrupting your regularly scheduled programming with some big news, and we want you to be a part of it.
That's right. We've got not one, but two massive milestones hitting at the same time, and we're throwing a party to celebrate both of them.
Okay, so milestone number 1, we are about to cross 500 episodes this fall. When we started this thing back in 2017, Tim, did you ever dream that we would make it to 500? I didn't.
No, not at all. Never crossed my mind. And milestone number 2, it's our 8th anniversary. So we're combining both celebrations into a single, epic, live event in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and that live event is going to happen October 16th, 2025. So mark your calendars. And we're going to be taking over a private room at Malcolm Yards in my hometown of Minneapolis, where Tim used to live when he was cool. And here's the kicker. If you attend, you'll get to participate in a live behavioral science experiment with Nick Epley.
Yeah, the famous University of Chicago professor, the researcher who proved that talking to strangers can actually make your day better. He will be sharing some observations on a happy life, and the audience will participate in a hands-on experiment.
And this isn't just a party, it's science in action. So check the show notes for details, but consider this your personal invitation to join Tim and me, as well as many other people, on Thursday, October 16th in Minneapolis. Make your travel plans. Sign up now. Make it happen, folks. Here we go.
We can't wait to see you. And until then, keep finding your groove. I'm glad you brought up discovery mindset, because that's one of the things that really hooked us, that Kurt and I really enjoy. We think curiosity is such an important tool in life in general. And do I get this right, Don, when it kind of works as a counterweight to the experts, or the people who think that they're expert, and it's like, I already know everything that there is to know. Maybe I'm oversimplifying, but
No. I'm laughing because you're exactly right.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There's an old saying, it's, we don't screw up because we tried something that we didn't know anything about. Is what we did, what we knew was absolutely the right thing to do. We were convinced that it was absolutely the right thing to do. We were sure of it. And that's where we went wrong. So I think part of this discovery mindset is you make a plan, you have a problem, you make a plan, you start executing the plan, but there's more than executing the plan. Every action, underlying every action, is a set of assumptions that this action will have X effect. If you begin treating that as an experiment, say, we thought this would happen. Did it happen or not? Oh, it did happen. Great. What did we learn? Or it didn't happen. What did we learn? Now we're always testing those underlying assumptions. And I think then we can see the cracks in the existing knowledge. And through those cracks, that's where innovation happens.
Yeah, I love that. I love the way that you talk about, being able to see that. And that, I think, is another big piece of what you talk about. And you talk about making the invisible more visible in the book. Help our listeners understand what you mean by that.
Let me give you an example. So let's just take processing an invoice in a company. Let's go to intellectual work. I stopped working in factories 20 years ago. Now it's all, biometrics and banking and all kinds of whatever. So let's just take an invoice going through. There's an old technique from the improvement people from Toyota and lean manufacturing, which is like, be the invoice, like tape the invoice to you. And like you walk through the system and see actually where it goes. So we do something similar, which is on the wall, we map from person to person to person, the path of that invoice. And back to your question that you asked, but I didn't get to answer yet, Kurt, is like, what is dynamic work design?
Yeah.
Is that our primary filter is that people are the only source of value-added work. They're the only ones doing work. Of course, you have computers, you have suppliers, you have departments, but it's actually people one by one that create the value that's happening, either intellectual work or physical work. And so we actually trace the work from those people, and then we map out who that invoice goes to, and then we go investigate and track one piece of work through, or several pieces of work, not spreadsheets and history, but like, let's just watch a couple invoices go through. And what we find out is it takes 3 weeks for that invoice to get through the system. But when we add up how much actual human work is involved in processing that invoice, it's like 3 hours max. Max.
Shouldn't be laughing.
So why does it take 3 weeks to do? Because it's all just sitting around waiting for people and waiting. So what we do is like focus on the human work, and then we link them up. This is connect the human chain, and we get the work flowing. So that is right there is the essence of dynamic work design. It's focused on people, focused on the work, and then we analyze it that way, and we actually get the work flowing.
You talked about the human chain, and actually that was one of my favorite chapters in the book, this idea of putting people back into the work. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I think there's an aspect of this that I found your perspective on it was when I read the title of the chapter, I'm like going, oh, I know exactly what this is. And then when I read the chapter, I'm going, oh, this is not what I thought it was. So help our listeners understand it a little bit.
Well, again, it goes back to the idea that the only real work that's being done is being done by humans. In factories, you can say, well, it's all automated, but okay, we don't focus on that. We're going to focus on the people, which in intellectual work, it's all people. Yeah. So think about how a decision gets made. Someone asks a question or a problem, and just try to draw a layout of the office area and where people are sitting, and try to draw the threads of how that decision gets made in a certain meeting. So like you could even draw a meeting room with the 8 people in that room that made the decision. Then track backwards. Who got the data? Where were the issues? How many iterations did it take? It turns into a spaghetti diagram. But when you think about that and say, we have to make this same decision every quarter, every month, or every week. So let's organize it. Who's got the data? Let's get the right cadence of data at the right time. And then when we sit down, we're going to have all the right people and the right information, and then we're going to make the decision quickly. So that's what it is. So we can map any kind of work. This comes from, you can see I have a hard time putting 2 sentences together. And my employees, when I would go off and start talking for like 30 minutes, they would just like, okay, Don, we have no clue what you just said. So, so they made a rule for me. Don, if you can't draw what you're saying on the whiteboard, then you're not allowed to talk to us about it. Oh. And that forced me to be super, super clear and now I have a rule, I have a saying, if you can't draw it, you don't understand it, and you certainly can't fix it. So we take these complex intellectual systems and flows in startups, in huge banks, in BP, the big oil, anything, startup to multi-billion dollars, and whatever people are talking about, we say, if you can't draw a picture of us that show us the flow of work, then you can't fix it. You can't even start to talk. So that's what we do for them, and we draw these complex things. We interview people, and then we just fuss it around, and then we give them a picture. The reaction is invariably like on the second day we show them the picture, they go like, "Is that what we do?" Because now they can see the moving pieces, because they can see the work moving from person to person. They can see all the loops and the detours, and they say, oh, let's just remove. And now it's like solving a geometry problem visually, just like take this loop out, put this here, and it becomes so clear and simple to them.
Yeah, I love the visual aspect of it. And I think there's again, the way that our human brains process information, and that we are able to cognitively think about it visually, is a different function within our brains than verbal or even, experiential in various different aspects of it. So I think that's really fantastic. One of the pieces that you talked about in that chapter was this idea of a handoff versus a huddle, and the types of information that get handled in each. Can you talk a little bit about that? We don't need to go in deep, but I thought that was a really, it crystallized for me, at least, a really key thing that I'm now going to work with my team on, because I'm going, I use them in the wrong, we do it wrong.
Exactly. After years of mapping this and, work from one person to another, we came upon the insight that there's really only 2 basic ways that people pass information. One, if something is known, it's repeatable, it's well discovered, then we just hand it off. Like your paycheck. Okay, you don't need to have a meeting about your paycheck. You work so many hours, put the hours in, or with a salary, and you get a check in the mail, right? We don't need to have a meeting about it. Okay, but if there's a problem, then we need to talk about it. If you ever had like one of those with really long emails, with 15 people on it, goes on forever. And then you get everyone in the office, call everyone to your office, like all 8 people in your office. And to resolve the issue takes like 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas otherwise that email is going back and forth because they're using a handoff instead of a huddle, which is we're going to get together, have a conversation, get all the extraneous information, let that conversation go wherever it needs to go quickly, come to a conclusion and go. So I think when you try to do a handoff try to do a huddle with a handoff like email, then it gets crazy. Or if you have a meeting, huddle, when like have a meeting about your paycheck, it's super boring. So people mix up those two modes all the time. Ever sitting along, there's only 2 things that are supposed to happen in a meeting: either make a decision or solve a problem. So anytime you're in a meeting and you're not doing one of those 2 things, you should probably be sending email.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's an awful too many times where I've seen the latter part, right? Where it should just be a simple handoff, or you don't need the 10 people in here.
Right.
You only need these 3 that are vital to what is being discussed. And but then we don't have to explain it to everybody else.
Right.
And it's like, you don't need to explain it to everybody else, or B, that could be in that email memo that comes out later.
Meetings are the worst form of organizational abuse to people that ever was invented. The worst form of abuse.
That might be a quote. We might take that.
Don't candy coat it. Don't.
Yeah.
I tell you, I still have those rough edges from being in the factory so many years ago.
I love it. I want to push forward just to get a little bit of the third section of the book is about action. You talked. I love this part where you said it's not so much about fixing, but removing friction. Right. And this felt very much like a behavioral science kind of a message, to us, because we talk about friction and removing friction or increasing friction, when the behavior is undesirable. But how did you get inspired to think about not just fixing, but removing friction?
I'd say this evolved over time with a lot of help from people and just a lot of experience. I think the biggest piece came from at one point when I was running the engine factory at Toyota at Harley. I hired one of the old masters from Toyota who was in this country, and he's consulting for Toyota with American suppliers, trying to teach him the system. And I called him up. I found out about him, and I called him up and asked him.
This is Mr. Oba, right?
Mr. Oba, of course, yes.
Yeah.
And I think working with him for a year and a half, the work is the work. So let's think about, you get a finished product, either a piece of software or a physical thing like a car. If you take every extraneous piece away and just say, if I'm this software program, is like, what's the least amount of effort to put into to get me here? Then you remove all the barriers. So when you go look at work, instead of trying to fix the work, realize the work is the work. The car needs to be put together a certain way. The code needs to be written a certain way. So when you go actually watch the work and you see all these barriers, I don't have the right information, it came wrong, I made a mistake, I didn't find, like all this extraneous things around the work. If you just remove all those things, what you're left with is just the physical work, and it just keeps getting more and more elegant. So reprocessing this is where reprocessing from the 90s went bad. And the guy, I forget the guy's name that wrote that book, but he came back and wrote a second book, which said, I was wrong. But his thing was start with a clean sheet of paper. And what he missed was go see what's happening. People say, there's no process. If work is coming out, there is a process. It's just broken. But the pieces to get it done are in there. You just got to remove everything else, and you'll begin to see layer by layer how it all fits together in the most elegant fashion.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's a beauty to that aspect, which says break it down to its simplest components. And then, if there's extra that you need to build on after that, but you need to understand it's that component of know what you're actually trying to do.
Right.
And then, otherwise you just get caught up in, as you said, it's like, this information's wrong. This is over here. This is what we get. There's too many, kind of things that just take your attention off of what's really important.
Exactly right.
So, yeah. So Don, one of the things we talk about here is being in your groove, finding a rhythm, having various different components, right? There's behavioral grooves, and over the years, Tim and I have kind of come on this thing about people get into a groove and they're different things. So, is there a rhythm or a groove to, doing the work that you kind of, when you're working with people, do you see that? And how do you help leaders
Absolutely.
or yourself find it?
That's a great question. The underlying thing, one of the underlying issues in calming the chaos in organizations is getting the cadence of work right. So there's an administrative cadence. Like we have a weekly meeting, a daily meeting, a monthly meeting, a quarterly meeting, annual meeting, and like the management tries to process everything through those meetings. But the work is not actually on that cadence. Sometimes the work is moving every minute or every day or every 4 months. So there are actually two cadences going on. Like think about a restaurant. The way people show up to eat at a restaurant. So restaurants have been pretty good at building their administrative cadence around the times and the ways people show up at a restaurant. But in organizations, we try to fit it into these daily, weekly, monthly buckets, and then stuff sits around or doesn't get addressed. So you have to understand the underlying cadence of the work itself. Sometimes, like in a crisis, it needs to be, we're going to check every hour.
Yeah.
But if I'm talking to a geologist who's trying to map out an oil field a mile underground that was formed 2 billion years ago, and he's doing it blindly, it's going to take him like 3 years to do it. So if I go into him every day and say, geez, Kurt, how's it going today? He's going to smack me. So I think this is really the trick to get this dynamism working is to, and then there's another cadence, like we call it a trigger. So for example, fires don't happen on a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So fire departments don't just come around once a week and say, do you have a fire happening?
Sorry, I did 2 days ago, but you weren't here.
Yeah, so. Exactly. That's the way work happens. Yeah. Where were you 2 days ago? That burned down. So I think there's a signal that goes up to say, we have these cadences, but there's a thing called a trigger. When you run out of a certain boundary that we can set or an expectation, then you pull the cord, the old and-on cord for Toyota. The idea behind it is not the cord. The idea behind it is I'm signaling for help. So think about project managers that lose a week and they never tell anybody. So he said, hey, I lost. The expectation is, Tim, if you lose a week in the schedule, you call me right away. So where is that system of who do I call? When do I call? How does that organization respond to that trigger? And that's asynchronous. That's based on events, not a schedule. So getting those elements right is what makes an organization really work together.
I love it. God, Don, this conversation is so much fun. This is really tremendous. I have to admit, I was impressed with the number of times that music comes up in the book. The number of musical analogies, the idea of,
orchestra, the orchestra,
the orchestra, the band. It's jazz as a innovation. Is not uncommon, but it doesn't show up in a lot of books. So I'm just kind of curious. If you were to pick a theme song for There's Got to Be a Better Way.
No, I can't answer this question.
Oh, come on.
I'm going to come up with something really stupid because I can't even remember the names of my kids anymore. I'm getting so old. So I definitely don't remember the names of songs. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, well, how about this? Fair enough. How about musical artists? How about if you had, let's say you're on a desert island and you've got a listening device and it's got 2 musical artists on it. Could you name 2 musical artists that you'd want to have with you on the desert island? You get the whole catalog, everything I've ever recorded.
Pandora, the free version.
Oh, well, I think that's a good cheat, though.
Yeah, John Coltrane.
The free version has advertisements. You're not going to even pay for it. I mean, get rid of those ads. You like, okay, all right, there you go.
Okay,
John Coltrane. I think the improvisation. That's even on Pandora. That's the one I listen to the most because it's got everything. It's got the underlying structure to it that people always don't recognize until they study it. They see the repetition, they see the themes, and the improvisation, the innovation that happens spontaneously. So it's all built in one package. So I think that's why I love jazz so much. But I'm a fan of all those things happen in all kinds of music, though. So
Yep.
it's like asking me which kid I like better. I love them both in different ways, you know?
Yeah, but you want that one a little bit more,
No,
right?
I'm no good at I
No.
don't answer that. What's your favorite? I don't do that one, except for coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, there you go. There you go. Coffee versus tea. That's an easy one. Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, very good.
Don, it has been absolutely a pleasure talking. And I think, as Tim mentioned, we could go on and on and on. We just, we'll have to have you back, and maybe we'll get Nelson along with you next time. And then I think it's just a wonderful conversation. You guys bring so much experience, so much insight, and I love, maybe Nelson's shouldn't be here because he'll go, into all the stuff. You made it really easy for people to kind of grasp and understand. So thank
thanks.
you.
No, Nelson's
Thank you
good
very
too,
much.
and we make a good tag team too.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Well, we'll have to have you back then. So
yeah, we'd be happy to do that. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate you read the book and had really great questions and helped me explain what this is about more. So it was really great and fun too.
welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I share ideas on what we learned from our discussion with Don, have a free-flowing conversation, and groove on whatever else comes into our Hanlon's razor brains.
Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm. You weren't expecting that, were you?
Not at all. Not at all.
I was malicious with it. That's why.
It was not malicious. Well, it certainly wasn't stupidity. It was intentional.
Yeah.
Tell listeners what Hanlon's razor is.
Hanlon's razor, and I'm going to give some background on this, Tim, that you brought up, right? So you researched this, but I think it's fantastic. So let me give you what Hanlon's razor is, and then I'm going to give some background on it. So Hanlon's razor is the statement, basically says, never attribute to malice that which is adequately, oh my gosh, I can't even talk. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. There you go. So what is fascinating about this is Hanlon's razor is named after Robert J. Hanlon, a computer programmer who submitted the phrase to a 1980s joke book, Murphy's Law Book number 2, More Reasons Why Things Go Wrong. And the adage is what I just said, never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. And I have used this so many times, and it's actually a really, I think it's like a philosophical insight on people.
It's also my driving companion. Whenever I'm in the car driving my automobile, Hanlon's razor is my go-to driving companion, thinking that goddamn idiot, he's cut.
He's trying to cut me off. He's doing this on purpose. Right.
And then I go, it could be stupidity. It could just be he doesn't know. That driver isn't looking. They're not paying attention. They're not a good driver. A whole bunch of other things. It doesn't always have to be malice. It doesn't have to be about me. So yeah.
Which is what I bring into work when I'm going and I'm dealing with stupid managers. Well, actually, that's what Don is saying, right? So that's
yes.
You're right. It's there. I think that's a really good lesson to take into this, right? Is like leaders aren't necessarily failing because they're malicious, right?
Yeah.
They're failing because they're not learning, right? They're not learning from their experiences.
Right.
And so to a certain degree, if you're not learning, you're stupid, right? So and there you go. So
yeah. And they're also, managers are oftentimes, because of this stupidity and not maliciousness, they're creating their own bottlenecks. They're creating a whole bunch of downstream problems that they're not aware of right away, because sometimes this learning takes time, which makes me think of a cool part of our conversation, which was the hot stove problem.
Yeah.
Like, a hot stove is such a beautiful example of how we learn. Touch the hot stove, instant learning. Instant. right? How's it go? We've got the cue, we've got the response. And when it comes to habits, right? We got the cue, we
Yeah.
got the response, and we got the reward.
Right.
And so this is a behavioralist model that came from early
Yeah,
1900s.
that's classical. This is classical conditioning, if I get this right, not operant conditioning, right? So I always get those two confused. Anyway, but it is this like touch, pain, learn, right?
Right.
Or it is child cry, gets fed, learn, right?
Yeah, right.
It is dog, um, hear bell, get food, salivate. Oh, that's not how that works. That's
No,
the other. That's the other thing. Yeah.
that's operant conditioning. Okay,
or no, is that? I don't remember. But
but
anyway.
but this is the
So,
problem, right? That's for
right.
so many managers. There's a problem on the shop floor. There's a problem in marketing. We created a piece. We a month before the marketing campaign was going to go live, had all this rationale built up a month ago as to why we thought those were the right words to use, the right media, the right frequency, all those kinds of things. Then a month later or 2 months later, it goes live, it goes out, and something doesn't work. And then we just go, well, it must be we did a bad job of making decisions, or that wasn't the right marketing campaign, or it was just a failure. But we fail to take into consideration because the hot stove isn't applying here. It isn't this immediate knowledge of what was actually involved in all the decisions that went into why did we do those things at the time. There were some certain circumstances and environmental aspects of what was going on in the organization 2 months ago that might not apply today,
Yeah.
that we're not thinking about.
Don's example of the cutting maintenance, I think was so on target, right?
Yeah.
Because this is something I think we need to cut costs. Great. It's important. We need to cut costs. How are we going to cut costs? We're going to cut costs. I can, get rid of half of my maintenance employees. Great. I save a whole ton of money
Immediately.
So actually, you're getting rewarded for the behavior because you may get a quarterly bonus. You might get the year-end bonus. You get accolades from your manager going, you save so much money. This is awesome. Great.
Yeah.
You get held up. You get recognized at the company meeting. Hey, look at Tim. He's awesome. He saved the company X number of thousands of dollars and was, went 150% over what we asked him to do. All this other great stuff. So you're getting a lesson, but the lesson is about the short-term benefit, and it's not about the long-term outcome that Don talked about. Well, now 2 years down the road, we haven't been doing enough maintenance on these machines. They're breaking down more often. It's shutting the line down. We are actually losing production so that those, 70, 80, 90, $110,000 things that saved $500,000 a year are costing us $2, $5, $10 million
Right.
in the long run, way more than whatever cost savings. But we didn't learn those lessons because they're too far removed. And there's this is what we talk about all the time with unintended consequences. We
Yep.
see it with incentives. We see it in other pieces of the world.
This also leads to a problem when leaders are changing jobs in big organizations. They move from one job to
Yeah.
another. They can kick the can down the road, and this is a trap that leaders fall into. It's like, well, they mentally know I'm not going to actually face the consequences of this because that might be a year or two before all those cuts in maintenance are going to really impact the factory. So somebody else is going to have to deal with that, and that's fine.
And
Not
I've
as
already
if
moved on. I'm in a new position. I got a promotion. I am in a different department, and that's not my problem. And I got rewarded for it. I'm going to keep doing the same thing because I'll just get moved on because I never have to face the consequences of what was actually happening.
Yeah, I have a client right now in financial services, and they're working on cybersecurity. And cybersecurity, from a behavioral perspective, takes a long time to actually see the results. The interventions are going to take a long time, and the technology changes, those interventions are going to be seen immediately.
Mm.
But to equate the two, the behavioral changes and the technology changes, and to measure them on the same measure is really a mistake.
It's apples versus oranges, or
Yeah.
probably a better way. It's I
Apples
don't know.
versus end tables.
An apple versus a apple cider that takes a while
Yeah.
to create, right? You see the apple, right away. You get to that's the problem that you're facing, right? A part of the issue is that,
Immediate.
okay,
Yeah.
we can institute this technology piece, and we can see it decreases this risk by 2%, right? But it's, or whatever that is, but the long term behavioral
Behavioral.
intervention,
Yeah.
there is no immediate 2%, but long term it could be a 10% or a 15% increase, but it takes a while to measure it, and you have to measure it in a different way. And that, I think, is another tough thing for organizations, is
Mm.
how do you measure, how are we able to measure the impact? It's one of the instances that with sales, that I do a lot of work with pharmaceutical companies, and the way that pharmaceutical sales are measured is not, because you're basically trying to influence doctors and healthcare providers to prescribe your product, but you're not talking, you're talking to those doctors and healthcare clinics and different things, but they're not actually buying your product.
Right.
They're,
Right.
next week, next month, they're giving a prescription. That prescription needs to go and filled by a pharmacy. That pharmacy then, it could be a local pharmacy, it could be a national chain pharmacy, it could be a mail-in pharmacy, right? And so, how do you attribute your conversation with that doctor as a sales rep to, like, amalgamate all of this, information, all the sales data, and it takes a while. So
Right. It could be months.
it can be months, and because pharmaceuticals buy the data from the pharmacy. Actually, there's a third party even in there. Anyway, it's
Right.
convoluted.
Right.
And so the changes you're making in your sales behavior, the marketing messaging that I'm using, the handouts that I'm using with physicians, you don't necessarily see those changes for 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And so again, what are you that learning of being able to apply my changes in behavior to the responses is delayed, and it's a crazy thing. And then, even like, what are you actually measuring? And there's like all sorts of different things you could be measuring, and are you measuring the right
Yes.
things in order to get the
Yes.
results? Yeah.
Yeah. Which really calls into question, if you're going to if you're thinking about making changes in your organization, look at the right measures. It's too easy for us to get into this binary thinking of it's going to be this or that, when this is a good time to zoom out and use that system two thinking in your brain to really analytically look at what is important here. What is the problem I'm trying to solve? What is the answer that I'm really looking for? And not give in to the binary, oh, it should be this or this.
Yeah.
There might be multiple options.
And again, it's the unintended consequences, right? So, again, it's the snake incentive, and I always forget which. It was like Venice or somewhere in India. Two very similar cities, right? But they had a snake issue, and so what they did is, there were too many snakes in the city, and so the city leaders said, we need to solve this. And instead of hiring people to go out and get the snakes, they said, look, we'll be really smart about this. We'll just pay people. If they bring a dead snake into us, we'll give them some money. So it sounds wonderful, right? Sounds like a
Create an
great
incentive.
creative
Yeah.
incentive. And you're now engaging the entire population.
Mhm.
However, what they didn't anticipate is, oh, this is a great way to make money. I will start breeding snakes. And so I'm not reducing the number of snakes. I'm adding to the number of snakes that come in, and I'm doing it. And when they realized it, they go, oh, we can't keep paying all these people because they're just breeding snakes and then bringing in the baby snakes that they killed, et cetera, et cetera. So they stopped it. And what ended up happening? Well, now I don't have any need for these snakes. I'm just going to let them go. And the city had increased number of snakes. So again, wrong lesson. It was the unintended consequences of well-intentioned. Again, Hanlon's razor, right?
Exactly. Okay. Anything else?
Just how awesome you are. Yeah, there you go.
Keep going.
Yeah, it's we don't have enough time for me to talk about how the total awesomeness of Tim Houlihan on the time we have would be a Joe Rogan show, and we don't want to do that.
Do we have enough time to talk about the awesomeness of Kurt Nelson?
No, but we do. Well, actually, we've already spent that time. It's done. It's gone. That's all we needed. But we do have some awesomeness coming up.
Yes.
Which is this major, awesome celebration that we are doing on October 16th, 2025 in Minneapolis, where we are celebrating our 500th episode release, which will happen before that, but also 8 years of you and me partnering on this. And we're going to have a great time.
Live event. You got to be there. So my recommendation is, if you're hearing this for the first time, book your tickets now, get your plane tickets, get your hotel, get it all lined up, because this is going to bring down the city. I mean, Minneapolis is just going to come to you
better hurry up, because those rooms are going to be sold out, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Very few hotel rooms left in Minneapolis by the time you hear this.
and folks, no, it's not because of this episode or this event, but no, we have a limited room, and so we do really please go and sign up if you're interested. If you can, I mean, I know for many people it's a drive if you live not here, but we'd love to have you. And if you come from far away, we might even give you a special prize. The furthest person who comes to this to the show. I don't know. I just threw that out. Tim's looking at me like, my God.
We don't have budget for prizes.
We don't have any budget, because we are bootstrapped in this thing.
Yes.
And we have we lose money on this program every month, because we don't do it because we don't do advertising, and we don't, so yeah. So
the good thing is we only lose money on a monthly basis. So
yeah. It's not like a daily basis.
It's not
just
daily,
a monthly basis.
Just monthly basis. Exactly. Okay. If you're not able to join us, if you feel like that's not within your time or financial budget, support our Substack. Jump on and go out to Substack and get our weekly updates and newsletters. Always have more insights than just the shows themselves, just our episodes. And if that's too much, write us a quick review. Go out to whatever you listen to your podcast and just give us a quick 2-sentence review would be fantastic. And if that's too much, we can ratchet it down to just give us a rating. Just click the stars that are equivalent with your joy and satisfaction with our 8-year-old 500 episode podcast.
I do want to go back and double down on the Substack, because Tim, you were talking with James Heyman, our very first guest on
episode number 1,
Behavioral Grooves.
Yeah.
And what did he say about the Substack? He was complimentary of how good it was and insightful. And coming from James, that's a big deal.
Yes, it is.
So
it is.
So folks, please go out, check out the Substack and subscribe to our newsletter. $5 a month. It's one of the different levels that you can pick. It's not that much, and it would help us out immensely and help you out as well. So
yeah. And ultimately, We hope that you take our conversation with Don Kieffer, and we hope that you can apply some of his really great insights this week as you go out and find your groove.